Similar to how we use Next.js in order to build the front end of our website, we're going to be using Hono as the same thing, but for our backend. So the front end of a website is what you visually see, what's being loaded on the website, maybe some browser-based state management, client-side, as they often call it, right? When you see client components, when you see the use client, that means that stuff is loaded and managed within the browser. It's kind of a gross oversimplification of it. And then server components, when we either don't put use client or explicitly put use server, those are components that are rendered in the backend. And when we try to communicate with our database within Neon and with other services such as Auth.js or middleware, we want to be able to do that in a way that makes sense to someone who is a JavaScript or a TypeScript developer, as we're currently working on. And so Hono provides us an easy way to create different API routes to basically do the things that we want within our backend, but in a way that's TypeScript, JavaScript friendly. So when we get started here, they have a lot of things within their documentation here. I'm going to be honest. While it's better than email.js, it's not very good. So we're going to be tentatively trying to follow different bits and pieces of it. For the most part, we're going to be trying to look for, sorry, not middlewares, different, you can even see here, right, it's saying for quick start here, we have to create Hono at latest, which would create a whole new application. Not exactly great for when we're building a project halfway. And so we really look at third-party middlewares here. This is one component of the backend that we're going to be worried about. And here we have Next.js here. And so if you click on that, you're going to be taken to this GitHub, and we're actually going to see the actual installation. And so it's kind of deep, buried within there, how you actually use Hono when you've already started a project. But basically just following, getting to middleware here. You have your third-party middleware, which takes us to this page here, next auth.js, which is the one that we're using. Takes us to this GitHub repository and this specific page. And so we're going to have to grab all of these pieces here. And so let's copy this real quick. Jump into our code. No, that's the wrong VS Code. Okay, so we're going to jump into our code here within VS Code. And we're just going to paste in this command here, npmi hono at hono auth.js and at auth/core. So we're going to start this so that we can actually have our backend routes connect to our middleware and to be able to communicate with the auth.js middleware within our project. Okay, so the Hono documentation is pretty complicated, and there's a lot of pieces that we're going to need that are all over the place. So I'd rather, instead of following something specifically within the documentation itself, I'm going to go slow, just like I did with Auth.js, and just work through setting up all of the pieces of Hono. Go through a little API example of being able to see in the browser us tapping into our API, grab some information from our middleware, and then add in using something that we're going to install in a little bit, Tanstack query, to be able to make programmatic API calls. And so not just API calls that we can do via the browser, but ones that we can do directly within our code. So first step that we're going to do is go into our sources here, our library, and we're going to create a new folder called Hono.ts. And inside of this, what we're going to do is import HC from Hono/client. And we're going to do export const client is equal to HC. We're going to have a type for our Hono client here. We'll do that in a second. And we're going to need to specify the URL. And so we're going to do process.env. And remember in our environment.local that just like our email.js public key, service ID, and template ID that are going to be needed at runtime, we're going to need to add next public to our environment variable, and then we're just going to use API URL, which in this case is going to be http://localhost 3000. So we're going to save that, go back into here. Just to be safe, we're going to copy and then paste this in so that we make sure that we have it the same. We're going to do exclamation point here to get rid of that error and say that yes, there is definitively a next public API URL. It's not going to be undefined. We're going to for sure make sure on our end that it exists in environment.local. I'm sure there's a nifty way for you to do like error checking and handling to make sure that you actually have the environment local and all that type of stuff. I just find this easier to take responsibility for yourself and actually remember to do it, and then just provide this exclamation point. Makes it a lot cleaner. But we need to specify what our Hono client type is. And so inside of our app here, and we created an API folder here for our authorization. If you look, let's see, do we have it here? This is why I'm going to have to dig through Hono to look for it. Is it inside of Vercel? Yeah, so this is the route that we want to create. So just to prove that I'm not grabbing this from nowhere, we need to create app/API/a catch-all route and then /route.ts. So basically, we can't use auth or next auth here. We need to go to the API, right? And then do this catch-all and then route.ts. So we're going to create a new folder, catch-all, ... route, two closing square brackets, and then inside of there, create a file, route.ts. So let's look at our route here just to make sure. App, API, catch-all, route.ts. And that looks basically the same. Cool. So what are we going to be putting inside of this routes? So we're going to need to import some things. We're going to need to import context and Hono from Hono. I believe, let's see here. I don't think we need to install anything extra for Vercel. We're going to be using Vercel later on in the project to deploy our website. And so I believe Hono/Vercel. Yep, it's you don't have to install anything extra. We're going to need to grab our auth config from @/auth config. And this is partially from this example here, right? Grabbing auth config and init auth config. So we're going to need to do this function. They use a get auth config here to generate it, but we that's why we imported our auth config from the file that we created to basically plug in our auth config here instead of creating this get auth config function. So we're going to need to import auth config and init auth config from @Hono/auth.js. So we installed that explicitly right here. Cool. Next on the list here, we can do const app is equal to new Hono. So we're creating a new Hono instance. Set our base path to be /API app.use star. So this is for every route. init auth config. So for every single one of our routes, we're going to have access to our middleware in each one of those. And actually, I think that it makes sense to, you know what, I did it inline, but it might make sense to make its own function. So in between here, we're going to kind of copy what they do. So we're going to do const. I mean, you can do what they do and do function. I just like using arrow function. So get auth config is equal to C, which is our context imported up here. It's going to return an auth config, which is the type grabbed from Hono.js here. And it's going to return an object, which is the spread operator auth config. So this is our auth config that we defined. Let's see, where is it? Here, auth config.ts. So we're just grabbing this object basically, and spreading it into this auth config function. Spreading means just transferring all the values one for one over. And then what we're going to need is secret, and that's going to be our context.environment.auth secret. And you might be wondering where that's from, right? It's this auth secret right here, grabbed from our environment variables. Wonderful. So now we need to use our get auth config function. Whoops, sorry. Don't need to call it. Just provide it. And then, let's see here. We are going to do const routes, not routers. And we'll just do app and we actually need to create some routes. So let's create some routes here. Let's just create a test.ts here. And we'll just, well, so you can define a route explicitly and see if they have that somewhere. Let's look for it over here. So yeah, you can do app.get. So you can just straight from this app right here, instead of doing this routes here, just do app.get and then provide all of this function, you know, of whatever you want the API route to do. But instead, we are going to try to split it up into different files. I personally think that that's best practice, and I think that somewhere within here they specify that that's best practice. Okay, and so going back to the code here, we're going to create a test route, and the way that we do that is to do const app, and I like to just call them apps, just because it kind of mirrors what we're going to be putting here for the routes. It doesn't really matter what you name it, but I'm just going to name it apps. So we're going to create a Hono instance. So basically it's like creating new Hono instances the same way that we do here, but we're just going to add them as routes to this kind of main app. And then you're going to see how it connects to the Hono client here for us to be able to use in the future. So we're going to create a get and just do /test here. And we are going to do async. No, it's not async. C arrow function here. Let me see if that is correct. Okay. And one of the things that we're going to also use here is to protect this test route with our auth.js middleware. So what we're going to do is run verify auth here, which is grabbed from when we installed at hono/auth.js. And all we're going to do is just provide this as a function in here, reorder this just so it's an ABC order, and then in order to actually authenticate our route to make sure that someone who is not logged in can't use it, we'll just use C. So C is a context variable here. It's just the only parameter, so usually I just write C arrow here, but you can wrap it in parentheses the way that they do here. We can do C dot get here, and what is wrong with me? I'm going to do auth user. And so you can see here, when we hover over user here, we have the adapter user, right? And if we don't get a user, because you can see that it can possibly be undefined, that would mean that we're not authorized. We want to return that. We don't want to continue on with our route. So we're going to do here, error unauthorized. So you can see here that we're returning a JSON object as the kind of the return for this route. And so we're going to give it an error, and then we're going to say unauthorized, and then it's a 401 unauthorized error code. So you just want to make sure that you return the right error code, so later on when you look at networking within the browser or your console logs or within the terminal, you see that you were on the right track there. Next, we can just return c.json, right, data, we can just do data colon, like whatever our return data is, hello world. Cool. So once we actually have a base return there on, not just this error, but just to the full function as a whole, that error disappeared here. Is basically saying like, hey, your return type doesn't match. You shouldn't be returning nothing. You should be returning something. And so, now that we return something from this function, we're all good there. And then lastly, we need to export default app. Make sure that you remember to do that. If not, we're not going to be able to get it in routes here. So what we're going to do is grab it. So we're going to import test. So because we export default app here, we can name it whatever we want. So we'll just import test. It's a default import, so we don't need these curly braces. And we're just going to grab it from test. There we go. And so you can see there we have this Hono object, and we can add it, route, provide the API route that we want it to be on, and then we provide the Hono object, and there we go. We've added a route to our app. Look, you can chain all of these gets and have all of these different routes. Sometimes you might have routes that overlap with each other, or have just slash, right, for one particular part of the database that you're trying to query. Just separating it out into each individual file. We'll see more later on why that makes sense. But that just kind of separates it out so that you don't just have a bunch of routes, and that you don't have to worry about name collision and that type of stuff. Cool. Looking back at the Hono tutorial page again, we're going to need to set up our AP or HTTPS methods. So get, post. The other two that they don't write here that we're going to use is patch and delete. So get means when we make a API call, we're going to be getting something from our database, from in this case Neon. Post means we're sending something to Neon. Patch, which is not here. Patch means we're going to be updating something. So like we're creating a patch. And the last one is delete. So we're going to be removing something. And those are basically the four primary HTTP methods that we're going to be worried about. So we go back into our code again, and we're basically going to do something similar to here. Actually, we can even copy paste this bit from here. And I'll write the last two, semicolon, semicolon, export const patch is equal to handle app. And remember that we imported handle here from Hono/Vercel. And then lastly, delete, export const delete. There we go. Thank you, Copilot. And then lastly, we're going to create an export type app type, which is equal to type of routes. There. So export type app type equals type of routes. And then into Hono here, we're going to provide app type from our routes, not from next/app, from this very long route here. Let's just reorder that in ABC order. Cool. let's go. Okay, let's test the fact that our API route works. So what we can do is /API, and remember that we created test here, and see 404 not found. So let's check in on that. Okay, so I found my error. It's because I wrote /test here again. You would find it if you did /test/test. See that it's unauthorized. It actually tells you, because you remember we were logged out here. So if we just want /API/test like I wanted, this route here would be empty. And then if we go back to there, we'll see unauthorized again. If we go back, we log in with Google. Just go through this real quick. Right, get to our home page. Happy. Let's go to our API/test again, and we get our data hello world. Okay, so minor issue there. Totally, accidentally put in an extra bit here. So just make sure in this get here, you just do /test. And here, this is where you add in that extension beyond /API. Great. So it shows that we have this test here. Look, if we wanted to access the user, let's just say, right, we provide the user to this instead of hello world. If we refresh this real quick, there we go. We're provided with all of the same information that was, that I'm pulling this up in our database. Great. Okay, so how would we be able to make that API call through, or rather in our code? Usually you could do some sort of either, AJAX or fetch request, but I think probably the best way right now to be able to utilize the routes that we build within Hono is Tanstack query. So if we just jump over to the documentation, it's twofold. It's not just the fact that it can fetch stuff, but the fact that in cache information and update our state and all the data that we've been able to collect from our database. It's incredibly powerful and important, and so that's what we're going to be using in our project. To install that, we're going to be using npm, which is usually the bog standard package manager that we've been using. We're going to copy this command here. We're going to run over into our code here, turn off our server. We're going to install this really quick, npmi at tanstack /react query. So we're just going to install that. Once that's installed, what we're going to need to do is go over to, let's see, where is it? Advanced server rendering. So we need to worry about using the Next.js app router here and add in an extra provider. So we need to be able to give query client provider, same way that we did sessions earlier with auth.js. We need to do the same thing with React query. So if we go back into our code, actually really quick, we're going to copy this. So copy that, make sure that it's TSX here. And we're going to clear down. We're going to close all this so that I can show you where exactly it is. Source, go into our providers. Remember that we had this providers, session provider with NextAuth, right? We're going to add in an extra one here. We're going to call it query provider.tsx, I believe. Yep, because we're going to have JSX in here, which is this part here. And we're going to need to add some stuff, one of which is an interface for this, because that's going to run an error. And so, let's see here. We're also going to, I believe, I think this part's fine, this part's fine, this part's fine. Yeah, we need to add in an interface. That's the only change that we make. So we're going to provide a query provider, by the way, because we already have providers here. You're going to have a name overlap if you do another providers here. So we're going to do query provider, singular, So change that real quick and do children React node there, and then colon query provider props. So give this children types, and you'll remove that error. You can go through, add all the semicolons, all the stuff here. But I'm not going to really too worry about it. It's all just copied in. I know it says here that you want to do it within providers, but we're not going to worry about that. So we can just remove that. There's a lot of comments here. Feel free to read them so you can understand what's going on underneath the hood. But all that we're going to need to really worry about is provide query provider that we just created there from / query provider. So let's just separate out those two there, and then provide the children. There we go. So in the same way as how they created providers here, wrapped it with layout, we have our query provider here. Inside of our session providers, it's fine that these are nested. They all just take children from each other. So, you're just kind of provassing whatever's inside, and whatever is inside is dictated by our layouts, right? So this provider here with an index with our session and query providers put here, and then we're just passing this children, which is all of our different pages here. That's where it's going to end up. Before we start up our server again, there's a couple things that we're going to need for the next step, which is creating a user organization. So if we go back into our wireframe here, we kind of have an intermediary step here. So if you don't have a user organization, and I had mentioned earlier that we're going to have an org toggle here, we don't have it yet because we haven't created a way for our user to add their organization. So let's actually finish out this whole onboarding here before we even get to all of the meat and potatoes of our application. And so for the couple of things that we're going to need UUID version 4 here. So we're just going to copy this here and paste it. And if you're looking for the URL for this, you can look up UUID and look for the npm page for it, Node Package Manager page for it, or this will be in the description or tutorial notes. That'll be included. Another thing that we're going to need, and something that I should have gone to the home page for, is support our local startup here. We're going to provide a little image for our organization, or rather allow the user to upload one. So we're going to use upload thing here to be able to do that. And so we're going to go into our documentations here. There's going to be a bunch of steps for this, so we're going to go slow, but we're going to use Next.js app router here. So make sure not to use the page routers. It's kind of old. We're going to use app router here, and we're going to copy this and paste this in to our terminal to run and install. Upload thing, there's a couple of extra steps here, which involve going to our dashboard here in the corner. So going into the dashboard, I have an existing project here that uses upload thing. So let's see, did that finish installing? It did. We're going to create a new app. We're going to call this Poke CRM. So we're going to use the default because we're going to use the free plan for this. Just for the tutorial, we're not going to spend too much money on it. Once you've created your project there, you're going to go over to your API keys, and we're going to copy this, and just as it says, to put it in your .environment.local, that's exactly what we're going to do. Simplify, collapse everything, go into our .environment.locals, add in this copy bit for upload thing, save it, and that's what this step was, this environment variable, after we grabbed it from our dashboard. Next, we're going to need to create a file router, so add it to our API. So just take note of the URL here, or not URL, but the path name for where the file goes. So we're going to go back into our code, go into source, go into app, go into API, and we're going to add in a new folder, upload thing. And let's just make sure, all one word. and then we're going to add in a file, core.ts, and then we are going to copy this and just paste it in. Wonderful. And then the next step after that, we need to create a route using that file router. So we're going to do another file here, route.ts. We're going to copy this, remove this stuff about any optional configs. That's all we're going to have for our project. And lastly, we're going to need to create upload things component. So we don't have a utils folder here. So what we're going to do is just create it within our lib folder to just add this file in there. So going into our lib folder here, we're going to add in a new file, all one word, upload thing.ts. And we are going to copy all this stuff and stick it in there. So let's see here. So we're going to do @/app/API upload thing/core instead of that tilde. So that's a change that you need to make there. Instead of the tilde that is used here, use the @ symbol. That'll clear up that little error there. So we're done with creating this upload thing.ts. Next up, there's some styles that are provided to style up this component, this upload button that's provided, and this drop zone. We're not going to personally use the drop zone. We're going to use the button. Feel free to, personal preference whether or not you want to use the kind of button or a drop zone, which is like a little area. You just drag and drop a file in. Either one works. We're just going to use the button, but feel free to use the drop zone. So within our project, we are going to clear down, go into our tailwind config.ts. So if we collapse everything, so this is where all of our stuff is. Remember earlier that we added in the styling for features to make sure that any component that we create within features gets some styling. So we are going to add in the upload thing styling. So there's two ways that we can do it. He specified a way where you just put everything, wrap everything within there. We have a convenient export statement here where we're going to do it. So first we're going to copy this import, just paste it at the top. And what we're going to do is, instead of wrapping this object up here, all we're going to do is with ut and just wrap this config down here. So I think it looks a lot better. I mean, I guess essentially the same thing as this. So, you can do it in 2 steps like this, or just grab this entire object and, throw it into with ut. So either way works. Okay, next step is we're going to go into our APIs, or API. Actually, nope. We're first going to go over to our database folder here. We have our schema, and one of the things that I'm going to do is look, this schema can get really big as your project has more and more elements that you want to put within your schema, have more tables, and look, a lot of projects can get really big. Having it all stuffed into one schema folder, not the smartest thing to do. So what we can do is we can just copy paste everything out of the schema page, create a new file, auth-schema.ts, paste everything in here, and basically what we can do is import all of the different chunks here. So we have users, accounts, so users, and I'll make this even easier, from /auth schema here, so that it auto completes, accounts, authenticators, sessions, and verification tokens. There we go, all in ABC order. And then the best part is, right, you can just copy this part here and do export all of this stuff, right? So you'll have a common export for the schema for whenever you do git generate, git migrate, all that good stuff, and you'll be able to separate them all out into separate files, and you can do that for our organization. So we're going to have org schema.ts, and our org schema has a few parts to it. First part, right, is the organizations itself, orgs, and the way that we create a table. So I'm going to go a little bit slow on this just because it's our first database schema that we're creating that wasn't a copy paste from auth.js or whatever the tutorial page said. Right, and so if we just examine this a little bit more deeply and look at the different pieces, it uses Zod to kind of, or actually, it doesn't, not yet. So we need to actually install that. So we are going to install npm I drizzle Zod. So before, when we were using our forms, we were using Zod to make sure that we type check everything. So we're going to do the same thing in our schema. They don't use it here in the auth. I'm not going to change it. You could technically use drizzle, ORM, PG, core, all that good stuff. They're base typing. I'm just going to use Zod so that when we create our API routes, we can use Zod to type check different parameters that are being passed in. You'll see it later on. It'll make more sense later on in the project. So we're going to create a Postgres table here from PG core. We're going to label this orgs. And you might have noticed, right, that in the tutorial they used lowercase, like accounts, users, all that type of stuff. I generally prefer to use uppercase when defining our tables here. It's just that whenever we declare a variable and is, we're using camel case here, we generally use lowercase to name variables, and so using uppercase here allows for us to avoid type collisions in the future when we have like const org is equal to database.query.capital O orgs here. So this has a kind of impression. So I'll write it out just to be sure, but like if you do like orgs is equal to db.query. Whatever, right? We haven't added it yet, so that's why it's not there. But like db.query.orgs, right? If you just did lowercase o, right, and we do different things like orgs dot whatever, right? You're gonna have a name collision between this orgs and this orgs. So by having them in different spelling, we'll avoid that. Hopefully that was a clear enough explanation. You'll see it later on when we go into the code. So some of the things that we want to track about a user's org: when was it created? So created at. We're going to use timestamp, which is fine to grab that from PG core. Created at. So we're going to use snake case. I believe this is what this one's called. Just because that's the convention for SQL. We don't need extra parameters there. We need to, by default, whenever something's created, it's going to be created at the same time as the table. So all you can do is just grab the date at the time in which this object was created. So by default, it can just be a new date. Oftentimes we'll specify it and be pedantic in that way, but be thorough, in that way. But we can just have this default here. ID, it'll be a text. So make sure we're grabbing it from PG core. Look, we could have used MySQL, SQLite. We're using NeonDB, so we need to make sure that we're using Postgres. So Postgres core there. You'll be able to see if you imported it from the wrong place because you'll suddenly have two import statements. So we're going to have ID here, and we're going to specify that this is the primary key. And it's not going to be null. Oops, not null. So it's not an optional parameter here. We're going to have image URL. So when someone uploads something using our upload thing, we're going to be able to store the URL to where it where the image is within upload me. So that'll be a text. A image will be optional, however. So we're going to have the image URL there, and we're not going to specify not null. So that means that it's optional. We're going to have a name for our organization. Text name also going to be not null. And oh, by the way, I call it orgs just because, again, I think I said it earlier. Like, you could specify it specifically as a business, but, you know, as an orgs, you know, you can have like sub orgs and all that type of stuff. So just naming it all orgs at the same level, and let the user parse through how they want to organize, you know, what is a business, what's a business unit, what's a team, etc., etc. They're all just going to be treated the same at the programmatic level. We want to see if we updated anything. So we're going to record when the last time an organization's been updated, in case we ever do like an organization log, like, hey, so-and-so changed something. We'll have that record for the user. We're going to have the address information. So there's two ways in which we can do this. We can just like actually include it inside of our orgs here, right? So we can just like keep going on and add blah, 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 all this additional information. Another option is you can do export const, create a new thing, org address equals pg table, and then call it org address, and inside of this object, specify an org ID, right, which will be of type text, and it's going to be not null, right, and then you're going to have a references, like all this part. Thank you, Copilot, for auto-completing it. We're going to have a references function here, which takes in a nested function, the org IDs here, which corresponds to this ID here. See, orgs.id, and basically says like, hey, if this orgs ID is no longer valid, we can't find this orgs ID, we're going to delete. So like if this organization's gone, this address is also going to be deleted. And then you can like have this address street here, street 2, city, etc., etc. You can do that separation. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm just going to do address street 2 text. This one's optional, so not null. So like I'm just going to all keep it within the same orgs object. I don't see a reason to separate it all out. You can feel free to do so. It's all personal preference. So thankfully this is auto-completing the rest for me. So we need a street, we need a street 2, we need a city, we need a state, we need a country, and we need a zip code. So, you know, that's pretty much all the pieces that were needed within our wireframe, all the information that we're going to be collecting here. We have our name, we have the address 1 line, address 2, city, state, zip code, and country. So just make sure there's 6 of these, right? So there's 6 input forms there. Let's see. So in order to create an effective business product here, we need to have limitations on our organization so that the user has an incentive to subscribe and pay you. And one of the ways that we can do that we can very easily see, is to limit the number of emails that someone can send. And so we're going to have an orgs limitations table here. So PG table, organization, limitations, and inside of this object, we're going to have created at a timestamp. We're going to have an ID, text, ID, dot, not null, and primary key. There, thank you, Copilot. We're going to have an email count, which will be an integer. So we're going to add that for the first time. Integer, email count of not null. Thank you, Copilot, for auto-completing that. So integer, email count of not null. So we're going to be forced to have some form of email count. And we can specify, hey, this is how many emails the user has sent so far. or sorry, this is the cap on the number of emails that the user has sent, so that we can track, like, okay, they are at the limit. They're not going to be allowed to send another email. Org ID text. So org ID, Copilot's going to finish it out. Orgs.id. What is wrong with this? Oh, Copilot made a mistake there. Arrow function is needed. There we go. So we need an arrow function for this references. And we have this on delete cascade. So when this orgs is deleted, we're also going to get rid of the limitations that correspond with that org. Lastly, we need to know which user is connected to which org. So we're going to specify user org. We're going to create a new user org table. Sorry. And we're going to do whether or not this organization is the primary organization. So by default, it's going to load for the user. You know, it's usually like, hey, someone left off working on this organization. It's going to continue to be the default. And there's not going to be not every organization is going to be the primary. So we're going to leave that as default false. But, you know, if the user is creating their first organization, it's going to be obviously set to primary, but by default, it's going to be false. Like if a user creates a lot of orgs, the next one that's created is not going to be primary. Cool. Unless we explicitly specify that, but you'll see later on when we do that. We're going to do, yep, that makes sense. So that's basically just a copy of this. And then we're going to need to get the user information. So user ID is text. So I can actually write this all out. User underscore ID dot not no. And then for the references, we haven't imported it yet, but we need our lowercase users grabbing from /auth schema. So make sure that that import is there. Separate that out. There. So users.id, comma, on delete cascade. So thank you, Copilot, there for auto-completing that. So those are the 3 additional bits that we're going to add into our schema. So you can see how, like, if we kept adding more and more stuff, the schema.ts would be stuffed to the gills. But, you know, by separating this out, it makes it look a lot easier. From org schema, these are all uppercase. I don't know why Copilot specified it as lowercase. So we're just going to create all these to uppercase. So remember, we're going to import our orgs limitation, and user orgs. I'm going to grab all these. We're going to stick that there and export it. There we go. Cool. And so now we can add our organization, orgs limits, org users to our Neon database. So right now we see that we don't have it. We go back over to here. Remember how we added the auth schema initially. We're going to run db.generate. And so you can see now that we have 8 tables inside of our Neon database. We only have 5. Remember that that just changes when we do generate. That creates a local SQL file, right? So instead of having to write all of this, right, we're just able to generate it. So much more convenient. I don't even really know how to write SQL that well, and so, you know, this is a great tool to have. And then instead of generating now, we need to push it to NeonDB. So we're going to migrate that. Let's see. Is there an error? Schema drizzle already exists. Skip. Let's see if that actually was created. Yep, it was. That was not an error. I think it was just a note. But now we have org limits created at email ID, orgs, this here, and then our user orgs. So these are all of the columns that we added, along with any relations that we might have between tables. Wonderful. Cool. Next, we're going to create some routes to just show that we can create and add our orgs. And we're going to create this page here in our onboarding. All right, so we're going to create an additional folder here. And just like login, there's not going to be multiple files that share, or multiple pages that share styles. So we can just create an onboarding route here so that when a user goes to our website /onboarding, they're going to get to this page here. We're going to create a page.tsx here, and we're going to do const onboarding page, and just for now have return a div onboarding, and remember to export default this page, else it's just going to have a 404 error. Cool. So if we go back to our project here and make sure that we're running npm run dev, here we go back to this and we go to /onboarding. It is running. Cool. So let this load real quick, and you can see in the top left corner here, onboarding. Wonderful. We're going to create a underscore components page, and I think that it's probably better, just as they had multiple steps to create the user's business and provide that information on the fly here, and is actually represented in my sample code. Split this into 2 steps. So we're going to have the business name, but we're also going to add a little way to add a logo for a business, and then have the address be its own separate step. So we're going to have a 2-step process here. Before we continue, we need to be able to protect our onboarding page. The user is only allowed to go to the onboarding page after they've been authenticated and logged in. And so, I can do something similar to what I did for the home page here and just do async await protect page. I'm actually going to go into something because we're going to remove it also from the home page. This is a way, or really there's 2 schools of thought, right? One way is you can do this exact same async here and await protect page here. And then we'd have to put all of our client components, because onboarding is going to be doing API calls, and those are only possible in client components. And so, because we can't mix asynchronous functions with client components, at least not yet, you'd have to do something like this, right? Onboarding page content, right? Something like this, and then do all the client component stuff, all the API calls. This would really be what the page looks like. Personally, I don't want to limit the number of components that I'm making. There's already going to be a couple components that make up an onboarding page component, so there's a lot of nested stuff here. So I'd much rather just try to streamline everything and create a protect page wrapper that still provides us the same protection from unauthorized users accessing different pages without forcing us to make an extra component to do API calls separately. So we're not going to do this, so let's get rid of all of these pieces here. Whoops. Here, and this here specifically, and just do div again, and the onboarding page, we'll just save that for now. Let's go into our features, authorization, components here, and create a new file, protect page wrapper.tsx here. I don't know why this console is open. I'm going to do export const protect page wrapper, and it's going to be accepting children. as a wrapper usually does. So let's create the interface for that. Interface, protect page, wrapper, props, children, react node. We don't need React to be imported there, so we'll remove it. We're going to give type to our children, protect page wrapper props here. And this is going to be the asynchronous function here. And we're going to do a similar thing to what we had. Where is it? Inside of our utils here, inside of the protect page. We're just going to grab this chunk here and paste this in here. So const sessions is equal to await auth. So we'll import that. And we need to do our redirect here. And just so that we have a little bit of control and allow for pages to specify where they want to redirect to. Usually it should be login, but who knows? Maybe there's a reason that you want to redirect to a different place. So you can do redirect path string here, and it'll be optional, right? And we're going to provide that in our props here. We're going to do, redirect path. And so we're going to put that here, question mark. So if it's a string, great. That's where the redirect, that's going to be passed to redirect here. Otherwise, if it doesn't exist, since it's optional, it's going to go to, or it's going to return login, the statement, into this redirect. So you can see that this functionally does the same thing as that protect page function does. And we're just going to return a fragment here with our children in it. And so then we can protect our onboarding page. We'll just cut this real quick. We're going to do protect page wrapper and then paste this stuff back in here. And you can see that, let's see here. So we are authorized. That's why we can still see this. If we go to /home, you can see that we are authorized. We are logged in. So if we try to log out, we'll be taken to the login screen. So let's just say go to landing page here, just so that we can see for sure. If we tried to went back to onboarding, we'd be redirected to the login. If we log back in, we get to home. We can do onboarding, right? And we're now allowed. Cool. So let's do the same thing for our home page and use this new protect page router. So you can see that like now we can use client here, right? And then we can do const something that's only allowed in client components using state, right? So this state, I don't know. Actually, we'll call it like message. I don't really care. Set message hello world, and then print that there, message, right, and then do the on click here to be set message clicked, right? And let's see if this actually works. It should. So it's hello world now, right? And if you click on it, did that not work? Set message clicked. Well, whatever the case may be. I mean, I guess if we did like button or something like that. Anyways, I'm going too deep on this example, but that's just showing like the state's already in there, and you can use client component only things here instead of being stopped by this router. So now we can add all of the different components that we're going to need for onboarding page only on the onboarding. So that's just a little example there. Let's go back to the home page here. Technically, we don't need this. You would only do this if you actually needed the user information. But later on, we'll create an API route that allows for us to access user information. So really, this function is not needed anymore. Redirect if authenticated. That's really only to pages, the landing page and login page. So I don't really know if we need to create a special wrapper just for those two. You can if you want. If you like this format, if you like the async with the protect pages, feel free to keep using that. So now we're going to remove this here. We're going to remove this. And we're going to cut this real quick. We're going to provide protect page wrapper and paste this stuff in here and remove this. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to bring this to the top. Cool. And let's see if we go back to home just to check, make sure everything works. There we go. And we can log out. If we try to go back to home, we get redirected to login. We log in real quick. We can access home. Awesome, awesome, awesome.